I think Charlie Coyle said it best after last night's game. The Boston Bruins were playing like a team already in the playoffs, while the Washington Capitals look like a team fighting for a playoff spot. Now, game 82 tonight, there's still some stuff at stake, and we'll discuss it on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be. Today is Tuesday, April 16th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers right now get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Can you believe it? We are at the final day of the regular season for the Boston Bruins. Game 82 goes tonight on home ice against the Ottawa Senators. We'll preview that one later on in the show after we break down what happened last night in Washington, Boston's final away game of the regular season. Bear with me as I continue to be a little hoarse. I had my kids' basketball tournament over the weekend. Went to a baseball game last night, Blue Jays Yankees. Got this sweet Jackie Robinson giveaway, and it was extra special because my uncle, who passed away a couple weeks ago, he used to man the gate for the giveaway despite being without vision, and we were able to get one of these hats from some of his friends who he volunteered with through the Lions Club up here. So that was pretty cool. Anyways, reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my dad jokes, hockey thoughts at Ian C. McLaren. Last night, the Bruins were shut out by a very desperate Washington Capitals team that is clinging to a wild card spot because of that win, and despite a minus 38 goal differential, which is pretty wild. Of all teams currently in playoff contention, they have by far the worst goal differential. The only other team in the East that's in a playoff spot with a negative goal differential is the New York Islanders, who clinched the spot last night. They're at minus 18. The Capitals, Red Wings, Penguins, Flyers, all still alive in the playoff race with one game remaining. Boston's loss kept the Panthers' hopes of winning the Atlantic very much alive as well. And the Bruins just overall did not play a very good game. They were outshot 25-16. Charlie Lindgren with a very important shutout for them, although the Bruins, again, only 16 shots, made it fairly easy. Jeremy Swayman made 23 saves at the other end of the ice, but like I said off the top, Charlie Coyle said it best. They looked like a team that was fighting for a playoff spot, while the Bruins looked like a team that was already in the playoffs. And that wasn't good. He added they didn't have their sense of urgency that they usually have, winning loose pucks, winning battles. They didn't do nearly enough of that. Head coach Jim Montgomery just flat out said he's not putting much into it. They just did not play well. And there's really not much more to be said about it. Kevin Shattenkirk, who received a fine from the NHL for a play against the Pittsburgh Penguins over the weekend, said they were just simple in their D zone. They didn't allow the Bruins to establish a forecheck. And then from there, they had a heavy forechecking game and the Capitals were very well connected, while the Bruins, not so much. John Carlson opened the scoring. Nick Dowd sealed the victory with an empty net goal, stripping Brad Marchand of the puck while he was trying to transition out of the defensive end. And, Dowd, who was a target for the Bruins at the trade deadline, comes back and secures the 2 points for his team with the empty net goal. Jeremy Swayman said he thought it was important for the Bruins to have a game like that this late in the season, because that's what they're going to see as early as Saturday. They have to match that intensity. They did not. Maybe they were being a bit, not hesitant, but maybe treating it more as like a preseason game, just getting ready for the playoffs, not wanting to get banged up or, lay things out on the line for what really wasn't that much of a meaningful game for the Boston Bruins. No matter what happens, they are going to have a tough matchup in round one, whether it be the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Toronto Maple Leafs. Those are the two scenarios that still face the Bruins heading into tonight's action against the Ottawa Senators, a game we'll preview later on in the podcast. But that's the situation. Either they win the Atlantic and match up against the Tampa Bay Lightning in round one, or they finish second and they play the Toronto Maple Leafs. Either way, it's going to be a tough matchup, and it's really interchangeable. Whether or not Tampa's the number one wildcard team or Toronto's the third team in the Atlantic, even though Boston has performed better against Toronto this season than against the Lightning, it's still a toss-up when you get into the playoffs, and the Bruins are going to have a tough road out of the Atlantic no matter what. We're going to talk later this week about expectations for the playoffs and expectations for the season and whether we can already count this as a successful season for the Bruins. I think we can. The fact that they're even in contention for first in the Atlantic with these very good teams that they're up against without Patrice Bergeron, that's a testament to Jim Montgomery, his staff, to the players who have stepped up, Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha, David Pastrnak, especially. He won't be a finalist for the Hart Trophy, but he should be top 5, I think. That's a very good season so far for the Bruins. The playoffs, it's incredibly difficult to win the Stanley Cup, and the Bruins are going to have a tough road no matter what. David Pastrnak currently 5th in the NHL in total points with 109, 2 up on Austin Matthews. There was some concerns last night, though, because Brandon Carlo left early, did not return with an undisclosed issue, and we'll discuss the implications of that here as the podcast continues. It's playoff time in the NHL and the NBA. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. All right, that's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Put some money down on the Bruins winning the Cup. Put some money on the over-under for tonight's Bruins Senators game. All at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th, the Locked On NFL Mock Drive Mock Draft Live. Here, local experts see who they're picking for every NFL franchise with live reactions from local college football experts, even a fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, so last night, this could not be good. Brandon Carlo left the game about 5 minutes into the third period and did not return. Now, it's unclear if this was injury related, and if so, when the injury occurred. You're going to want to keep an eye on the morning skate here on Tuesday and see if he is able to join for tonight's game against the Ottawa Senators. If Carlo were to be out, that would be a huge hit for the Boston Bruins. And, Brandon Carlo has an injury history, of course. Unfortunately, it tends to rear its head around the playoffs. And hopefully Carlo is able to suit up. Maybe not for tonight's game, but for game 1 against either the Maple Leafs or the Lightning. Now, if Carlo were to be out for any length of time, that would leave a huge hole in the top 4. Matt Grzelcyk was out last night as well as a scratch. So you have, McAvoy, Lindholm as your top 2 guys. And then you got to go, if Carlo's out, then you put Grzelcyk back in, and then you rely on Andrew Peeke, Kevin Shattenkirk, and Parker Wotherspoon. Now, those guys have been effective. Peeke has come in and done very well for the Bruins. But, Shattenkirk, Wotherspoon have been in and out of the lineup. No matter what, if Brandon Carlo is out for any length of time, that is a huge hit for the Boston Bruins. So hopefully he's all right. Hopefully he's able to suit up for game 1. But as of right now, his status is very, very much up in the air after not playing the last little bit of the third period. Scott McLaughlin of WEEI wrote, this was the biggest negative from last night's game. Not the loss, but Carlo's status. Unclear what happened. Unclear how serious it would be. The Bruins didn't release an official update on Twitter to rule him out of the game. And Jim Montgomery wasn't even asked about Carlo by reporters in Washington after the game. So there's no sense of whether or not it's a upper body or lower body injury. We don't even know if it's an injury at this point. Maybe he just wasn't feeling well and had to poop. We'll see what happens. Jim Montgomery won't be available to the media until tonight around 5:40 p.m. A lot of people went back and watched his last several shifts, didn't see anything that jumped out. There were a couple block shots. He didn't seem to be hobbling. Again, if it is something serious and he's out for any playoff games, that would be a huge loss. He has averaged just a shade under 20 minutes per game. The team's top shutdown defender. He gets more defensive zone starts than anybody else. Leads the team in penalty kill ice time. Plus 17 at 5-on-5, if that matters to you. And again, Peeke, Wotherspoon would be the guys picking up some of the slack there. But some tougher defensive minutes as well for McAvoy and Lindholm, which could take away from their more offensive minutes. Power play again, just a note from last night, was a disaster. Um, they really need to work on that before the playoffs begin. I think I was on Saturday. Jim Montgomery was giving Charlie McAvoy a bit of an earful on the bench. It was more of a message to everybody that the power play is not good enough and everybody needs to shape up. Swayman was the best player last night for the Bruins, and we'll see who gets the game one start, but it'll likely be Linus Ullmark tonight going up against the Ottawa Senators. And that is a game that we will preview here as the podcast continues. As the Bruins look to lock down first in the Atlantic tonight, you can win big by playing Daily Fantasy Hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Connor McDavid, David Pastrnak, Nathan McKinnon will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. So win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper by paying attention and nailing your picks. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Game 82 tonight on home ice. The Boston Bruins taking on the Ottawa Senators. And with a win, they can clinch first in the Atlantic. Now, if they lose and the Florida Panthers beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, then the Panthers will win first. The Bruins will fall to second and take on those Maple Leafs in round one. So there is a lot at stake here tonight for the Boston Bruins. You want to shake off last night's rather poor effort and go into the postseason playing as well as possible. You also don't want to risk injury, as we saw last night potentially with Brandon Carlo. The Bruins so far this season are 2-0 against the Senators, winning 3-2 in overtime back in January, 6-2 on March 19th. And the Senators, a very disappointing season for them. They are currently the third worst team in the conference, 5 points back of the New Jersey Devils for 13th, 12 points up on Columbus for last place, and they will be looking for a new head coach this offseason after firing DJ Smith earlier this season. They've been relying on Jacques Martin and Daniel Alfredsson. Just seeing now, the Buffalo Sabres have fired their head coach after a disappointing season for them as well. They're 5 points out of a playoff spot with no chance of getting up there. So that's a very interesting development there. Now, the Senators, this is a team that the Bruins can and should beat tonight. Let's just say that. Their goaltending has been very bad all season long. They have the 28th ranked defense, allowing 3.46 goals per game. Their offense, they have some studs, but still a 20th ranked offense. Special teams are not very good. They do have players who can score, obviously. Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Drake Batherson, Claude Giroux. Their goaltending all year has been just abysmal. Eunice Korpisalo with an .890 save percentage. Anton Forsberg at .886. That's something they're going to need to address. If they had even league average goaltending, they'd probably be a playoff team. But they don't. And this is a game the Bruins can win here tonight. And again, what is at stake tonight? Well, the first round matchup, again, very much up in the air for the Bruins. If they win, they clinch the Atlantic and will take on the Tampa Bay Lightning in round one. If they lose and the Panthers beat the Toronto Maple Leafs, then Boston will fall to second in the Atlantic and will take on those Maple Leafs in round one. That's just a function of the current playoff format. If you look at the Eastern Conference standings at the moment, it's pretty much. I talked last week about how the Bruins may have been hosed by the playoff format. As it stands right now, they are third in the conference behind the Rangers and the Hurricanes. If you go 1-8, they'd be matched up with the 6th seed, which is the Tampa Bay Lightning. If they were to fall to 4th, they'd be matched up with the 5th seed, which is the Toronto Maple Leafs. So things are leveling off kind of as they should at the moment. The big battle remains for the second wildcard spot. Ton of scenarios there. Any of Washington, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia could still clinch that spot, which is pretty wild. And they will take on the New York Rangers in round one. It'll be the Hurricanes and Islanders likely, and then the Bruins. The Bruins and all four of these Atlantic teams right now are ranked 3, 4, 5, 6 in the conference. So any combination of those matchups, Boston, Toronto, Boston, Tampa, would fall within, that old format. So the Atlantic Division teams, 13 points separate them at the moment. Tampa further behind, but still a very dangerous team. And either way, for the Bruins, it's going to be a tough road. So that's it for today's episode, my friends. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel and the Twitter account as I will offer up any updates for Brandon Carlo as we see it. And we'll see what happens tonight against the Senators. That will decide where the Bruins will begin the playoffs. Against who, anyways. They'll be the home team, but we don't know if it'll be hosting Toronto or Tampa Bay. So keep it locked to Locked On Boston Bruins for all the latest on the black and gold. Please do subscribe if you have not already. And we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.